I'm also delighted, of course, to welcome all of you to the first panel in this conference, and to introduce the panelists, who are, each one of them is an expert in his or her field. We have a panel that will focus on the role of the media in Egypt's military coup as an introductory panel for the conference. And we have, as Karen said, 3 prominent speakers. We'll start with Ms. Nadia Elmagd, who's a very well-established commentator and journalist. And then we'll followed by Dr. Mohamad Elmasry, who is currently at the University of Denver on a visiting fellowship, and then he's moving to the University of Alabama. And then he's a professor of media and mass communication. And then we'll conclude with Mr. Wael Abbas, who is a very renowned blogger, and actually one of the earliest bloggers in Egypt, who, for many of us, reading his blogs was very useful in inducing change and also in raising the awareness of the situation in Egypt under Mubarak and then afterwards. Each panelist will talk for about 15 to 20 minutes, maximum 20 minutes. Of course, I will keep the time. This will be followed by a 20 minutes moderation. I will ask them some questions from the moderator, myself. And then we'll open the floor for questions and answers. So I will ask Ms. Nadia Elmagd to start her presentation. Thank you very much.
I've been covering Egypt and the Middle East since 1989, which means 25 years. And I'm a political scientist by education. I have an MA and BA in political science. So I like this combination helped me a lot in covering Egypt and the Middle East. And I would like to start with that I had a lot of illusion about the Egyptian media. Actually, when we were at the university, sometimes like some of our media courses, like they were telling us like not to write like this. You know, this is how we were introduced. But, and also I'm very aware of how the Egyptian media used to like respect whoever is in power. And this is very important to see the contrast between like how the media were during Mubarak time and since Morsi came to office, which is very different. And also I think part of that I was disillusioned with the way of the Egyptian media, that I chose to sort of like most of my career has been with foreign media. But like now I shifted to Arabic, and I will also try to say why. Let's go to the role of the media briefly after what we thought was the 25th of Jan revolution. Many of these media were against the revolution, but then when it sort of like it appeared to be winning, you had Al-Ahram saying, "Sha'b asqat al-nizam," the people managed to overthrow the regime, and many of the, especially the media persons, the talk shows, like completely shifted, you know, their stance, and all of them started to claim that they were like took role in the revolution, and like whenever they are angry about something, they would say, so why did we undertake the revolution? The revolution that they were really opposed to, and accusing many of those people who are in Tahrir of being agents and paid and all of that. And I think also to understand how they managed to do this, and later on to play the role they played in paving the way for the coup, I really think we have to keep the larger context of the problem of the education and media of Mubarak regime. I really think that Mubarak should be tried more, not less than his role in killing the protesters during the revolution, is this kind of education and media that sort of made people, beside the illiteracy, like the literal illiteracy of not being able to read and write, which is about 50% of Egyptians, unfortunately, it's even those who can read and write, but they are sort of illiterate in a sense of when it comes to politics, when it comes to facts, media. So that's why they were very easily fooled so many times leading up to the coup. So this is a very important factor to sort of keep in mind. So they managed to shift and stuff, but it was very interesting to see how almost all the state-owned media and so-called independent media, and when I say media, I mean print and TV, but there is nothing as independent media in Egypt. There is privately owned by tycoons, by businessmen who are very closely associated with the regime. And when I mean the regime, it's Mubarak regime as well as the after-coup regime, because they are one and the same. I mean, I think it's very clear now that الشعب ما أسقطش النظام. The people did not overthrow the regime. Mubarak was put aside while the regime, worked very hard to sort of make the comeback through the 3rd of July coup. So this media has been very hostile to President Morsi since he was elected, even before his election. Like there was all of this, like that Ahmed Shafi, of course, also of Mubarak regime, the last prime minister under Mubarak, that he won, and there was all of this confusion. So Morsi and his regime and the Brotherhood were attacked from very early on, which is very different from the respect and awe that was by this media to Mubarak. And then started it took different shapes and forms, this hostility. And what was very amazing to me, of course, I didn't know that there is going to be a coup at the time, but it was amazing for me the amount of lies that were spread in the print and in the TV, in the media in general. And one of the main weaknesses of the Muslim Brotherhood that they don't have a media arm at all. They are maybe good in other branches, but not in the media. So they were severely attacked, and almost with no somebody else, sort of countering these lies and stuff. And when at the time, I've been on Twitter for 3 years and stuff, and so I was refuting these lies as a professional journalist, and I was severely criticized by many some of them used to be my friends, and some of them I used to respect in different media outlets and newspapers, and viciously attacked and insulted, and personal insults and the defamation campaign. So more and more, I don't really believe in conspiracy theories, but more and more I feel like something have been cooking for a long time, paving the way with these lies in order sort of to reach the 30th of June and then the 3rd of July. And also here I remember very well the leak, the video leak of Sisi, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. It was supposedly took place in December 2012, in which he spoke to a group of soldiers about the importance of extending arms in the media, and he told them that this is what the military intelligence is doing, but it will take time. So actually I think this was very true. I was approached myself from some of the military intelligence at the time, and we spoke, and I think they were sort of testing people out to see what are their views and how willing they are to sort of cooperate with them. So I think this happened with a lot of people, and this also in a way explains why all of these media personalities and the way they were attacking Morsi, especially towards the end, as if they were sure that he is not going to stay in power, or that he's not going to, punish them for what they were saying and stuff. And it's countless of lies, about, I can't start to sort of count or say how many, but for instance, and some of these lies are still going on, that the Brotherhood or Hamas were the ones who killed the soldiers on the 5th of August 2012 with no proof. And actually I asked somebody in the military intelligence, and he told me, we have no clue. There is not even a shred of information, while Morsi and the Brotherhood and Hamas have been accused until now. And I remember that how the Sisi and the people were saying just they're gonna announce, and that Morsi was preventing them from announcing who did this crime, and until now nobody said anything. That Morsi gave up on Halayb and Shalatin on the border between Egypt and Sudan. That Morsi is the one who released the killers of Sadat and all of these, which is not true. Most of these people were released exactly during SCAF time, exactly in March, as early as March 2011. All of these lies that continued, and it was very. So this has made it very easy sort of to dehumanize the Muslim Brotherhood as if they are not Egyptians. Like if you're a Muslim Brotherhood, this means you are not Egyptians. And they have no tool of sort of, defending themselves or answering back all of these accusations. All the crimes, they became you can say Muslim Brotherhood or terrorists, Nobody even asks about what's the proof you have, what's the evidence. Like now, it's very easy to find any official, whether in the army or in the police, announcing the crime that happened, like an attack on soldiers or on policemen, and at the same time, while he's announcing it, he's accusing the Brotherhood, in the same time, just minutes after the attack, and nobody asks. So all of this doesn't mean that the Brotherhood didn't commit mistakes and stuff, but it's very different to commit political mistakes than being accused of being a criminal or a spy or all of these shame, trials that Morsi and many of the Brotherhood and other people are being tried of in Egypt. So I really believe that without the media role in sort of portray, being so much anti the Brotherhood, never mind the democracy, never mind that this is a newborn democracy, that it should have taken a chance, that people did a revolution because they wanted a different course of ruling and of events, not the way of Mubarak. Unfortunately, many journalists, whether well-known or new ones, it's you are appointed in a newspaper or you are being paid millions as a TV host. It's not because of the tough questions you ask or because of you enlighten the people or you your investigative reporting. It's just the opposite. It's how much lies you spread. It's much vulgar. It's how much vulgar you are. Really, people would say unthinkable things, swearing, cursing on air. This is very acceptable as long as you are doing this to the Brotherhood, who can't answer you back or defend themselves. Really, insults that they've never. Yeah, not only the Brotherhood, but this is where their main target, to do the coup. I'm not saying they are. Yeah, exactly. So, so it's that's how people get hired and keep their jobs. And of course, later on, as we are going to see, it became more any revolutionary, but it was first to get rid of the Brotherhood and also, to make all of these other revolutionary forces like 6th of April, like many other revolutionaries who were upset with the Brotherhood for different reasons, for being reformists, for letting them down, for so many reasons, which is I think the people who were in charge of the coup played divide and rule very well, like any military occupation would do. Then they started to attack the 6th of April people, and I think Wael is gonna talk more about this. So these people, it's that the competition is not about how to verify your information. No, it's about how more lies you spread, more accusations, more this. And this is, of course, and sort of leading the way. It was even written on channels, the road to the 30th of June. And I really believe that all of the state institutions played a role in that, in sort of, you know, like some of my friends who were opposed to the 25th of Jan, who never participated in protests. Many of them didn't go to Europe or didn't go to the North Coast. Everybody was waiting to take part of this because of the role that the media played with all of the institutions, the arms of the army, even the foreign ministry was against the president, everybody, which I really think this was one of the Morsi's major mistakes, that he didn't you know, sort of came out and say the situation, because I really think even without the 30th of June, he wouldn't have been able to stay in power when he doesn't have any of the institutions with him. Unfortunately, we all learned the very hard way. And of course, after the coup, now it's even more and more and more. We have a newspaper, Egyptian newspaper, who said that Sisi met God twice. This is a headline and a picture of Sisi, like, you know, El-Fajr newspaper said that Sisi met God twice. Another cleric said that Sisi is a prophet. It's unbelievable. Things are being said. Nobody is challenging them. They used to sort of dispute with Morsi about his breath. You know, he did that. He looked at his watch. He did that. Nothing. Of course, nobody questions a prophet or somebody who's meeting with God. So that's the state of the Egyptian media now. And between sort of like denying crimes committed, thousands of Egyptians have been killed since the 3rd of July. About something between 16,000 and 22 or more thousand are in prison, and about the same number are also injured since 3rd of July 2013. But this doesn't matter, you know, like these are not considered to be Egyptians. So the lies continue, the brainwash even continue much, much worse. So, and the media between denying such crimes or justifying for them, which I think it's a very bad situation, not only for the media, but for the whole political picture of Egypt, for being Egyptian. Like, there is a huge division and polarization among Egyptians for all of these, like, you know, becoming enemies within the same family. So all of these things just doesn't look good, and I don't think it's going to lead to any good, you know, results. And even if Sisi is going to be elected as president, it's not going to solve any of these, you know, problems. And we really, the whole Egyptian media need to be, I don't think, reformed. I don't think it deserves its name. There is no media. It's all brainwashing and really playing a very, very dangerous role until now, that I think its repercussions is going to stay with us for a long time. But I think the only solution for that is to continue to be credible, to continue to tell truth, not lies, and refute lies and reveal lies, and insist on the code of honor and the ethics and the credibility of journalism that based on principles, not on love or hate of certain political regime or certain group. I don't think there is any other way than that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Elmagd, for an informative and issues that will be good for discussion points when we get to the questions and answers. And I will just now move to Dr. Mohamad Elmasry. I think he will address the issue of the media between two uprisings and the economic and social and political factors behind this role.
I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me to speak today. I'm going to get right into this because I have a lot that I want to get to. And I usually like to start my talks on the Egyptian press system by providing a little bit of background from the scholarly literature on the Egyptian press. We have a growing body of literature, scholarly literature on the Egyptian press. So one of the things that we notice, which I think is very pertinent, is that Egyptian journalism suffers from a lack of professionalism. Okay? If you look at the different measures of professionalism, journalistic professionalism, Egyptian journalism scores quite low. The education system, the journalism education system, is of very poor quality. Many journalists who graduate from major universities are not trained, for instance, on how to write stories. They're not trained on how to conduct interviews, how to write with, in the inverted pyramid style. Training programs at news outlets are severely lacking, right? So training is lacking. There are also issues with the journalistic ideology, notions of objectivity, fairness, balance, detachment, neutrality are not emphasized nearly to the degree that they should. So given those basic realities, it's not surprising that journalists last year told researcher Professor Abdullah Schleifer that they are activists. So in the United States, journalists would say they are watchdogs. But in Egypt, many journalists consider themselves activists. So it's a much more subjective type of enterprise. It's not surprising that in a study that I just finished, and it will be published soon in the International Journal of Communication, my research team and I found that journalists admitted openly to us in sit-down interviews last summer that they intentionally biased the news. They intentionally biased the news, and they even showed us examples and told us how they did this and how their editors taught them to bias the news. It's not surprising either that some journalists, broadcast journalists and print journalists, have now begun to take credit for what they consider to be the glorious June 30th revolution, what political scientists consider a military coup. People like Khairi Ramadan, Ibrahim Isa, these are people that are of Anderson Cooper-like stature in Egyptian media circles. They have come out and said, look, we deserve the credit. We are the ones who engaged in this type of character assassination, right? Delegitimating the Muslim Brotherhood, Mohamad Morsi, and also the revolutionary project and the democratic project more generally, right? Not just the Brotherhood. So I think it's important to put this in that kind of context. We're not dealing with Canada. We're not dealing with the US. There are plenty of problems in the US press, right? Associated with structural constraints that exert themselves upon news production processes. But the US does not suffer from a gross lack of professionalism. Journalists generally do try to be balanced, and they try to be objective rather. Okay, so having said that, I want to look briefly at the pre-coup, the pre-military coup period, and then more extensively at the post-coup period. And what I've been engaged in really over the past couple of years is extensive discourse analysis, examining the discourses that are prominent in Egyptian news media. So if you look at this pre-coup period, the Egyptian media, the news media, were quite effective at delegitimating the new political order, the post-Mubarak political order, right? Delegitimating the Muslim Brotherhood when they were elected, delegitimating Mohamad Morsi, and also, to a lesser extent, the democratic process in general. Just to give you a few examples, and Nadia covered some of these, but if you look at the coverage of the 2012 Constitution, right, its flaws notwithstanding, much of the coverage was not discussing problems or flaws or legitimate debates or critiques about the Constitution. The coverage was can only be described as absolutely hysterical. So you have serious news stories discussing, for instance, the idea that the Constitution would permit necrophilia, right? That would permit men to have sex with their dead wives, right? It was completely baseless, but this was a serious news story. You had stories about the document making marriage permissible to young girls, young children, right? Again, completely baseless, but these were serious news stories. We had news stories about basically creating this kind of image of the nahs, what they called in Egypt the nahs, the curse of Mohamad Morsi, right? That he brought bad luck, that he was the cause of disasters. These were serious news headlines in Egypt, that he was the cause of earthquakes and other disasters. And then, as Nadia mentioned, this idea that Morsi and the Brotherhood were prepared to sell the Suez Canal to Qatar. They were prepared to sell.
They already sold it.
Right. That was some of the reports that they already sold it. They had a contract in place. The pyramids, the Brotherhood was selling the pyramids to Qatar. They were giving away the Sinai Peninsula to the Palestinians. And a lot of this has continued. If you look at some recent news stories, there was a headline that said that the American president is a member of the Muslim Brotherhood. Barack Obama is a member of the Muslim Brotherhood. That's a serious...
And his brother is the main financier.
Of Al-Qaeda, yeah. That Obama's brother is a member and a financer of the Al-Qaeda movement. So these are the kinds of absurd things. There was also a story in the Tahrir network. This is just recently, a news broadcast journalist named Rania Badawi broke a story that suggested that The Simpsons, the Fox cartoon, The Simpsons, predicted the Arab Spring back in 2001 in one of its episodes. And the suggestion made by this newscaster was that the Arab Spring was a foreign plot, that it was plotted by the Americans long ago. So you can see this kind of effort. It's not just to delegitimate the Muslim Brotherhood or Mohamad Morsi. That's certainly a big part of it, because they were at the head of this sort of this post-democratic order, the post-Mubarak order, but it was also delegitimating in many ways democracy and the post-Mubarak period more generally. If you look at the post-coup period, in many ways, it's more disturbing than the pre-coup period. Because what I've argued in some of the research that I've carried out is that there has been a campaign of elimination, an eliminationist campaign ongoing. What has been suggested by Egyptian media and also in Egyptian political discourse is that the people who are opposed to the July 3rd order, the people that are opposed to military rule in Egypt, are not truly Egyptian, and they must be eliminated, right? So there's this eliminationist discourse that is used, and I think this is important because it's used, this discourse is used to justify mass repression, right? We have 21,000 people in jail, upwards of between 2,000 and 3,000 people killed, right? But these things are justified and in some cases celebrated as part of this campaign. So some of my colleagues and I, we actually examined 15 hours of post-military coup broadcast news coverage in Egypt, and then also some newspaper coverage. We looked at programs by very prominent people. These are prominent programs by Lamis al-Hadidi, Khairi Ramadan, Mahmoud Saad, Dina Abdurrahman. These are very prominent kind of Anderson Cooper-like figures in Egypt. And you look at July 3rd, the protesters that were protesting against Morsi on June 30th, July 1st, and July 2nd, they were described, and I think this is very significant, they were described as Ashab, the nation, the people. They are the people. And this was made very clear. Mahmoud Saad said, these are the people. This is the nation, right? That's a direct quote from him. So the implication was quite clear that the people who are opposed to this movement, right, opposed to this new order, are not truly Egyptian. And this was made explicitly clear. Dina Abdurrahman encapsulated this nicely when she said, quote, "There are not two groups in Egypt. there is the Egyptian nation on one side, and there is a group of Muslim brothers on the other side, end quote. Lamis al-Hadidi, one of her guests on July 3rd, was actually the owner of her network, the CBC network. And he said, certainly we are Egyptians, and Egypt has returned to us, end quote. Lamis al-Hadidi herself proclaimed on July 3rd that Egypt is coming back to us. That's a direct quote. She also said, quote, neither the French, nor the English, nor the Israelis, nor the Muslim Brotherhood can rape the people of Egypt, end quote. So the idea, again, that these people that are against military rule, I mean, she's, of course, tying it to the Brotherhood, but this is also very misleading, because the people who are against military rule in Egypt, I mean, it's a diverse group. It's certainly not all Brotherhood members, but this is how it's portrayed in the media. And that's significant. So when there are anti-military coup protests on campus now, campuses of Al-Azhar University, Cairo University, Ain Shams, the Egyptian media call the protesters Tullab al-Ikhwan, the Muslim Brotherhood students. Of course, they're not Muslim Brotherhood students. They're not members of the Muslim Brotherhood, right? I'm sure some of them are, right? Empirically, some data would suggest that about a third, probably less, are members of the Brotherhood, but the majority are not members of the Brotherhood. They're people who are opposed to military rule. So you can see this kind of discursive construction. Broadcaster Khairi Ramadan said that these people, these anti-coup people in Egypt, what he would consider anti-revolution people, quote, do not understand the meaning of nation. So they're not really of us. They're not Egyptian. He also said these people are, quote, foreign agents and, quote, unpatriotic. One of Mahmoud Saad's guests, who was a prominent judge, said that Egypt had been, quote, kidnapped during that post-revolution, post-Mubarak period. He then praised God that, quote, Egypt has been returned to the Egyptian people, end quote. One of Dina Abdurrahman's guests said, quote, Egypt will not become modern as long as this cancerous tumor exists inside the nation, end quote. So there's a need to eliminate. The discourse is quite clear that these people must be eliminated. And in this context, we get lots of news stories, ongoing news stories about the Brotherhood and other anti-coup people, 6th of April, revolutionary socialists, liberal secular activists, as being foreign agents of Qatar, of the United States, of Israel. There was recently a story in the Al-Wafd newspaper about the Muslim Brotherhood's Zionist agenda, which is, of course, from a political science perspective, completely absurd, but this is what is being suggested. One of the guests, very frequent guest, Dr. Hazem Abdul Azim, said that there is, quote, unusual pressure, end quote, from the United States to ensure that Mohamad Morsi is the president of Egypt. So the Brotherhood was sort of in bed with the Obama administration and with the United States. And this is not just in the news media, by the way. There was a post-military coup song released, and the chorus of the song says, quote, you, meaning the Brotherhood or people in their camp or that are not sympathetic to the new order, you are a nation and we are a separate nation. You have a Lord and we have a separate Lord. Okay? So again, discursively constructing people that are opposed to the military coup and particularly the Muslim Brotherhood as fundamentally un-Egyptian and disloyal to the Egyptian state. Many other examples that I could give about how they are not loyal to the Egyptian borders, they don't care about the country's interests, they don't care about the national identity, and so on and so forth. Another important discourse that emerges post-July 3rd, and this is interesting because it emerges on July 3rd, is this discourse about terrorism and criminality. So almost overnight, we see this played up and emphasized. I mean, there were whispers before July 3rd, but really we get this strong emphasis on July 3rd that the Muslim Brotherhood and those who are maybe sympathetic to them are not just incompetent governors, but they are, in fact, terrorists. So Lamis al-Hadidi proclaimed on July 3rd that, quote, terrorism will not govern us, end quote. This is before there were any, of course, there were no terrorist attacks. There was some minor vandalism committed in some parts of Upper Egypt, but there were no terrorist attacks. Al-Hadidi also says on July 3rd, and this is important, she said, quote, we now know who opened the prisons and led the prison break. She said, we now know who the snipers were. She's talking about the people who were killing the revolutionaries in 2011 during the anti-Mubarak protests. There were snipers. There were Mubarak regime snipers in the buildings killing people. And she's saying, we now know who these people were. This was the Muslim Brotherhood, is what she's saying. She said that we now know that Morsi was guilty of, quote, spying on Egypt, and that one of Morsi's top aides, along with Morsi, quote, should be tried for spying on Egypt, end quote. A very interesting discourse also in this post-coup environment emerges, justifying the violence by the police, and in some cases celebrating the violence. Remember that there were several massacres committed. Human Rights Watch called these massacres the worst unlawful mass killings in Egypt's modern history. So really mass atrocities, but these things were celebrated, and the police were praised for protecting the people, the Egyptian people, from these anti-coup protesters, right? The government said, Hazm al-Biblawi, the then prime minister, said that the police used, quote, dabt al-nafs, self-control, in dispersing the protests. A police leader was interviewed after one of the dispersals, and he said, quote, we exercised maximum self-control, end quote. And he said that they escorted the people out of the square peacefully. Hassan Shahin, who was one of the prominent guests, a political activist, said, quote, I've never seen a dispersal of a protest like this before, end quote. He was talking about how humane he thought it was. He said that the police were paving the way for people to leave, and they were using microphones and so on and so forth, right? One of the police officers who was interviewed by Lamis al-Hadidi on July 3rd, this is now before the massacres, you can see this kind of as a prelude. He's kind of threatening the Egyptian people, the protesters, and he's also threatening the police. He says that there was a message sent to all of Egypt's police officers on July 3rd, and he says, quote, anyone that shows any support for the deposed president will be met with decisiveness and firmness from his colleagues. Whoever claims to be a man of the police or a man of the army, and who then tries to support the deposed president, we are perfectly willing, I swear to God, to shoot him with live ammunition. I swear. End quote. So, again, this idea that the police were the heroes, the police behaved in a very heroic way, a very humane way, and the protesters were in fact guilty. In some cases in some of the discourses that I observed, killing themselves apparently. They are the ones who were guilty of starting the fire, which we now know was started by the security forces at Rabaa al-Adawiyya to sort of destroy evidence, and there were many bodies that were burned. But this was immediately blamed. As it was breaking, I mean, as the story that the fire was burning, it was described as the anti-coup protesters. They are the ones who started this fire before leaving the square. There were also, and this is the last thing I'll say, there were also all kinds of stories about the sit-ins at Rabaa and Nahda. So one of the stories, and I think this is very instructive, one of the ongoing stories, and again, these are established discourses, these are not singular news reports. One of the stories said that the anti-coup protesters at Rabaa square were storing bodies underneath the stage. And specifically, they had killed between 20 and 80 people and had been storing the bodies underneath the stage for a period of 3 weeks prior to the dispersal. Now remember, this is 100-degree heat, and there are journalists literally 24 hours a day in and out of this square. It's a completely absurd narrative. It took on a life of its own. There were dozens of reports on this story in the print media and also in the TV news media. It got to the point where David Kirkpatrick of the New York Times had to write a story debunking this. I mean, we shouldn't have to debunk this kind of a myth, but he actually wrote an analysis about this in August of 2013. So it's a deeply problematic media environment in Egypt, and it's going to be very difficult for Egyptian society to make a democratic turn unless the press system is restructured and reformed. Thank you.
Now we move to Mr. Abbas.
Good morning. I'm delighted to be here among you. My name is Wael Abbas. I'm an Egyptian blogger and activist. I've been active for like 10 years now, openly on the internet. I used to tackle issues related to human rights violations, police brutality, torture, and freedom of expression, freedom of speech in general. Today, I want to show some examples of how there is some kind of an infilat, as we say in Arabic, in the Egyptian media. There is no respect whatsoever to the codes of ethics that are respected in most countries of the world, except for maybe North Korea and Iran and stuff like that. What is being done in the media now is exposing a lot of people, swearing and insulting a lot of people, endangering some people's lives, including activists, citizens who don't have a way to defend themselves. And the Egyptian syndicate of journalists is doing nothing about it. The head of the syndicate is a supporter of the coup. And also the law is doing nothing about it. There is an absence of law at the moment in Egypt. Lots of people filed complaints about what happened to them in the media, including airing private phone calls, and nothing, absolutely nothing was done. In fact, there was a court ruling that claimed that a journalist is entitled to hide his sources, and he is free to broadcast phone calls recorded illegally of private citizens and activists and journalists. I'll try to play some videos now to illustrate that. The next video is Lamis Al-Hadidi. She's commenting on what we call in Egypt the little inventor, the child inventor who traveled to the United States in order to attend a conference. And he decided to stay in the United States because he was exposed to arrest and torture back in Egypt, and he decided not to go back. And now Lamis Al-Hadidi is insulting him and insulting his family for doing so.
عبد الله ماهوش جواز سفر على فكره. عبد الله سحبت اوراق سفره ووثيقه سفره في امريكا. ايه هو مرتب مع امريكا بقى. مش غلطتنا ابدا على الاطلاق ان احنا ندافع عن مبدا وبعدين هذا يطلع بلا مبدا. راح عبد الله في 60 سلامه. ولا يهمنا، مصر فيها مليون حد اجدع واحسن وانضف ويستاهل يعيش في البلد. انت مش شايف انها بلد تستاهل؟ ان شاء الله ما عنك رجعت. ان شاء الله ما عنك رجعت. الناس كلها بتقول لك انتربول ونجيبه. لا 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 ما
She's addressing a private person, a minor, and she's insulting him on television, and he doesn't give him or any representative or a member of his family the right to defend him or to respond to what she's saying about his collaboration with the American authorities and stuff like that. The next video is Yusri Fouda, who is writing for Columbia Journalism, by the way. And he is now the host of a discussion on television, and he kicks out one of the attendees because he rejected the way he's dealing with the audience, and that he tried to stop one of the audience when he mentioned that there is no equality between the victims of the revolution and the victims of the police and the army.
احنا بقالنا 3 سنين من 25 حتى الان، والسؤال بيطرح نفسه ليه احنا لغايه دلوقتي بنناقش ده؟ علشان الاولاد دول الانبا شباب في مصر دول ولاد ناس فقراء. لو حد مات من القوات المسلحه او حد مات.
لا انا لا اريد مقارنه معلش.
As you can see, he interrupted him once he mentioned the army. He interrupted the guy and he said it is not acceptable to compare the victims of the revolution and the victims of the army. And this is Yusri Fouda, and as I said, he writes for Columbia Journalism. This is a program called The Black Box. This program airs private, illegally recorded phone conversations between activists and journalists and activists and their friends too. This is a telephone call between me and Wael, and we were discussing what was going on in Tahrir Square.
بقول لك ايه والنبي عشان انا بس مؤدب ومش عايز اطلع في تويتر اعمل حاجه ومحتاجك انت تعملها والنبي. ايه خير؟ عايز بس الراجل اللي بيخطف الميكروفون من شفت انت كلمه البلتاجي الرخم ده اللي كل شويه يخطف الميكروفون من عصام شرف ويقعد يقول حاجات. محمد البلتاجي بتاع الاخوان؟ انت ما شفتش الفيديو بتاع عصام شرف؟
This is another video of the infamous Egyptian lawyer Murtada Mansour. And in this video, he is swearing at me, swearing at my family, posting my picture, and telling the people, if you see this guy in the street, beat him up.
في باروكه صفراء ولا سوداء؟ ده انت هتبقى سنتك سوداء، عملوا عليك حفله. ما تيجي من قطر. ما ترجع.
That's not me. He's talking about somebody else.
اسكتوا الجنسيه المصريه عن الكلاب دول.
He's saying club. Club dogs on television, national television.
أكثر من نصف ضباط الجيش والشرطة ورجال النيابة والقضاء والإعلام يتكلمون يعملون كسرا. سادة يالا أنت إيه الأدب وابن كلب جزمة.
As you can see, the kind of language he's using. ولاد كلب جزم وقليل أدب ومش عارف إيه.
If I go to the question answer,
yeah, sure,
right?
of course.
I'll go to the question answer.
Yeah,
all right.
sure.
The way the format works for the panels is that the moderator will ask or try to moderate or will ask a few questions to the panelists, and then after they respond, we'll open the floor for question and answer from the audience. So I will just, for the sake of time, I will ask 3 questions for each of the panels. One to Ms. Elmagd about the issue of media and control. In the 1990s, Egypt started to move from a state-controlled media into what we call independent free media. However, as we see in 2011 to 2013-14, the media has not been any more free. So 2 questions. What's the role of maybe money, maybe pockets of authoritarianism, maybe influence into this, and what's the best structure or suggestion that you would like to make to try to reform this issue? I will just ask the questions and then exactly so they can also have time to think about them. To Dr. Elmasry about the other political opponents. What has the regime used has the media used the same techniques and tactics? Like this could be at least the best way to describe this, or one way to describe this is benign fascism, actually. So has the media used the same tactics with non-Muslim, non-Islamist opponents, like the general political opponents, activists, and so on? And to Mr. Abbas, of course, you have been blogging freely for years, and you have been one of the experts on social media. So my question is, to what extent is the social media reflective of the reality and the genuine public opinion in the street? And is it a good indication or indicator of how people think? If we look at the debates on Facebook, and I can cite a number of examples when everybody thought that based on the debate that's taking place on Facebook, let's say the constitutional amendments, the vote will be for no, and then we find out that actually the majority voted yes. So how do you explain this discrepancy and gap between the Facebook activists and the reality?
Okay, to answer your question, I don't think we ever had independent, free, whether print or TV networks. I think the best way to describe them is that they are privately owned. And this doesn't make them neither independent nor free, because they are owned by very wealthy businessmen who wouldn't have been able to do their business without being in very close relationship with the Mubarak regime. So, like, when they did these ventures, it was not about sort of, you know, really enlightening the people or like having more of a free press or media, but it's to put a pretense, something like the so-called ongoing elections. Egyptians are very good with pretending things, but actually, like how people are hired in these to work in these newspapers or TV, or whoever is chosen to be the host. And as I said, that they are being paid millions. It's not because they, you know, it's not because of a noble role they play. No, it's because they, like, you know, take the state agenda on a different degree, because there is not so much credibility to the state TV. So they are playing the role, you know, with the money of these businessmen. And it's not actually strange now to sort of like remember that CBC was immediately established after the revolution, and it has been playing this a great role in all in the coup and paving the way for it. So. And not only that, most of these, whether print or media, like as in TV, they are also in close contact, if not control, by security apparatus, whether on the police side, like state security, or intelligence, even like, you know, like the people who are there have to have the approval or the clearance of these apparatus. Not only the hosts, even the guests have to be approved by these apparatus. So there, again, which means there is no independent or free anything about it. So this is the role of the money. This money are paid for a certain idea, which is, I think, a very good example is the coup. And how to structure this is like an old, new, difficult question, because it's unfortunately these things, like, it costs a lot of money to establish a newspaper or a TV. So unless there is a way that there is no a businessman or interest, you know, in controlling, in pouring millions of dollars into this, if you find another way to finance this, unless you have this, which is not easy, you're going to have, you know, the same kind of media which is leading to the disasters that Egypt is going through.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for your question, Dr. Shahin. I tried to touch on this a little bit. Perhaps I didn't emphasize it enough. But yes, the short answer is non-brotherhood groups, including liberals, secularists, groups like the April 6th movement, the revolutionary socialists, and others, and prominent individual figures like Mr. Abbas, are demonized in the Egyptian media for their opposition to the new political order. They are also often dehumanized and described as un-Egyptian. Okay, so that is true. I think it's also important to note, though, that there's a type of almost a hierarchy of evil, if you will. So the Muslim Brotherhood are kind of at the top. They epitomize evil, and then there are other groups who follow closely. If I could just touch really quickly on this issue of restructuring the Egyptian press. I just finished a project on this with a co-author, a prominent media scholar, and what we've suggested, because this is a very perplexing and important problem, this issue of concentration of ownership in Egypt. Ms. Nadia is absolutely right. You have this small group of very wealthy multimillionaires, billionaires even, who own all of the media. And they all happen to have the same basic political ideas. So what can we do about this? What we've suggested is we need a very radical kind of solution. And our solution was that the editorial decision-making has to be completely separated from ownership. In other words, somebody who owns a press outlet in Egypt okay, will have ownership. It will be his or her business, but that person will have no editorial decision-making whatsoever. They won't have a decision on who the editor-in-chief or the executive producer will be, and they will not have any say on the editorial line, okay? This is, of course, only one small suggestion. We have a list of suggestions, but I think this would be important, and there's precedent for this. If you look in the United States and the Wall Street Journal, when Rupert Murdoch moved to purchase the Wall Street Journal, what did the journalists say? Well, money talks, so they couldn't prevent him from buying the paper, but they said, you will not have any editorial decision-making. So there was a separation made between the owner, the business owner, and the editorial line. And I think that's incredibly important in the case of Egypt.
Concerning the social media, I still believe that the social media is the most democratic thing that happened to Egypt at the moment, despite all the negative aspects that we are seeing lately. Because lately there is some kind of a war on the social media, and the activists are still, they still have their own ground, they still standing still, they are still fighting, they still have a chance, unlike on the traditional media where they are completely barred or banned from appearing or talking or discussing anything. The regime is using a new technique called electronic committees. These committees are made of lots of fake accounts that attack the activists, defame them, post private and illegally obtained photos and videos and conversations of the activists on the internet in order to defame them. But the activists still have a chance to respond to that and have a chance to fight back using the techniques that they know, electronic techniques, or even contacting the hosts of these websites that post the defamation of them. There's more chance of ideas fighting each other on the internet rather than in traditional media. In traditional media, the only chance here is propaganda. The regime is completely controlling the traditional media, whether it's newspapers or radio stations or government TV stations or even independent private stations, because there is censorship that is affecting all these media outlets, and only what the regime approves is the thing to be aired, unfortunately. So I believe that social media can be considered a real representation of the Egyptian public opinion, with or against. All the you can find all the points of view available there. You can interact with the owners of these ideas, and they all have a chance, they all have a say, they all can respond to each other. But it's not the same in the traditional media.
If as you say, the post-coup period is basically a conflict, a secular versus religious conflict, with the seculars, being the army, of course, and the old line traditional elite, and with the press and the media backing them up now, versus the Brotherhood fundamentally. Then how could the Brotherhood post-Mubarak period gain so much power?
Is this for me?
Well, for anybody.
Yeah, anyone can answer. Yeah, go ahead.
Let me just quickly, and then if somebody wants to come. First of all, I would be very cautious about representing this as a secularist versus religious conflict. I think it's a conflict over democracy. So we've seen that people that are opposed to military rule, whether they're Islamists or secularists, are demonized. That's number one. Number two, the regime is far from secular. The regime is using religious discourse and religious mandate. So they're soliciting the help of Al-Azhar University, the Islamic University. They're getting fatwa. They're getting religious decrees being issued to basically immunize their decisions, and so on and so forth. You heard Nadia's discussion about Sisi being a messenger of God and meeting God. So this is not, they cannot be called a secular regime. That's just the quick comment that I wanted to make, and if anybody wants to,
This is addressed to Mr. Abbas. You lump together Iran and North Korea as Egypt. I would like to caution you that this is an incorrect statement, in that there are different factions in Iran, different perspectives and different policies like any other place. So it is completely inaccurate to put Iran in the same category as the societies that you mentioned. And here is my question to anyone in the panel, and that is, in your opinion, how is the current media represents women? Thank you.
Okay, yes, Mr. Abbas. Yes.
Well, I believe that what I said is correct. I believe that Iran is a totalitarian country with a totalitarian regime, and no other voices are allowed in the media except that the voices that support the regime and agree with whatever the regime is saying. And that's what I believe most of the people that I know about Iran. Thank you.
It's one of the, I think the women issue is one of the things that's always like used, and the abuse depends on, you know, like how they fit. Sometimes they are welcome to participate in protests, but then like when they are harmed or abused, like the question is some of the people or the media would blame the women. Why did they go there, or why did they participate? And unfortunately, the women issue has been really abused, especially lately. Like women are shown that many of the Sisi supporters are women. Women are being shown at polling stations dancing. And we had the outgoing Prime Minister Hazem al-Biblawi saying in, I think it was Davos, that yeah, Sisi is very popular among women because he is handsome. And yeah, really. Sort of like it's this thing that, you know, that Sisi is of certain appeal to women, and Sisi is also using this, like, yeah, like I'm appealing to my sister and mom and, you know, daughter to go and like vote, but like it's more like it's not any improvement of the role of the women or representation of women, rather than sort of, it's sort of like in a way like the use of religion. You know, like when it fits, it's okay to use it, but sometimes, no, it's not okay. So it's still, and it's still this stereotype that, you know, women are emotional, women are less of rational creatures. So, you know, they would support somebody like Sisi because he's good looking from their point of view, or and the macho, and he is the man, and, you know, so it's, again, actually, I feel like it's, not very respectful of women or any improvement of women than during Mubarak era or before the coup. Still, women are being as I said, used and abused by the media and by the political regime. And I just wanted to say something to Mr. David Hurst, like to answer his question about that. I agree that the media needs more than reform, but actually this is takes us to the whole problem of the whole system. Who is going to sack who is going to sack who, and who is going to go and arrest who? Not that I agree of that anybody should be arrested, but like we know we have, if we have a problem in the media, we have a larger and bigger problem in the judicial system, which is like really also again playing a huge role in the, you know, in the coup. So it's the whole system that needs to be restructured before you can do anything to the media in order to be able to enforce law in any aspect.
In the short term, if we want to, because the reform is not going to happen in this regime. So to overthrow this regime or change this regime, how do we technologically bring this, all of these videos that you're going to show on YouTube to be on people's TV? Because people don't have computers in Egypt. Not most of them, at least.
Thank you.
Can I
yes, please.
I'm aware of this problem, and I know that most of the Egyptians don't have internet at home or don't have computers and stuff like that, and they mostly receive the information from television or from radio and stuff like that. But that was the case back in 2005 when we first started, 2004, 2005. We had audience that can be numbered in only dozens, but we have made scoops, we've made stories that forced the traditional media to cover them, or they will be, or else they will lag behind. Because people started discussing the stories we were posting on the internet, and the media wasn't covering the stories, and they were asking questions, why is the media absent from that? After the revolution, the numbers of people who connected themselves to the internet to get information has increased. Like, it has not tripled, not quadrupled, but it has grown like 10 times or more. And I'm counting on the spread of technology, and I'm counting also on the edge that we have on the internet that is going to force the traditional media in order to compete with us to cover the stories that we are covering. Just like we forced the media back during Mubarak's time, in his heyday, in the time when he was most vicious, to cover stories about torture in police stations. And we forced the Mubarak's regime itself to take some of its officers to court and put them on trial and later put them in jail. So if we were able to do that back then, inshallah, hopefully we might be able to do that, I hope in the near future, not in the far future.
Excellent. Briefly.
My name is Jim Dingman. I'm with Pacifica Radio here in New York.
Thank you.
I covered the Arab Spring on coordinated production at the station in New York. I've also been in the Middle East as a reporter 25, 30 years on and off. So I want to ask you a question about the military and the media. The media is essentially, the Egyptian army has been in power since the coup of overthrowing Farouk. So we're not talking about something, we're talking about a coup that just happened in relationship to a coup that happened back in the 50s. So I'm just trying to figure out from you all, what is the issue of legitimacy with the military at this point? Because when the Arab Spring occurred, I heard people all the time referring to the army as sort of a sacred institution. I heard people here all the time talking about it. And I felt that some of them were quite naive, because I felt when the army's in power, they're going to do it they are in power, they're going to do exactly what they want. And it turned out they did do what they wanted. So I just wanted to get that question, their role in the media in general. Secondly, the way you perceive the Facebook operations and the social media. I was around people in the United States who were training people to go back, and they were training them in social media before the revolution started here in the United States. They were training in the United States before they went over there. So there was that little trickle going on. But the question I have is, like, right now, how are people actually understanding this? Where are the content analyses of what the media is occurring? Because some of this, I think, is pie in the sky. To think that the Army is going to allow anything to come out that will question the narrative they're putting out because they're in power, I think, is also naive. I mean, I just have that gut reaction to some of the discussion I'm hearing, because I don't see why would they allow that, given the fact that they're in power and they control the economy.
All right. The question is about role of the media, role of the military in the media in general, and how the people perceive what they hear from the media, and why would the military allow any kind of dissent to be expressed in public forums? Yeah, all the three of you. Yes. So Nadia, would you like to start?
I think you're right about that. That the army has been in control since 1952, and by of the political, like they are ruling, and by definition they are in control of the media, and I think people like to think that the army is something different and it's a sacred institution, and the Egyptians like to have their sacred you know, things that they like to believe in. And I think many believed so until the latest coup. And despite the latest coup, still many people are sort of confusing between, like, when you criticize like massacres committed by the army or by the police, and the army itself as an institution. Like, it's sort of, you shouldn't criticize. This is something that has to do with the Egyptian heritage, and also like they like to have sacred things, and like also part of the education and part of the media is not to question too much and to deny and to justify. So this is part of the problem. And of course you're right that the army who's in control of everything and the media is not going to allow. That's why they are so upset at somebody like Aljazeera, for instance, because they were almost like the only Arabic channel that's sort of like showing a different scenario of what's going on. I think that's why Abdullah Shami is in prison, because how dared he, you know, air from Rabaa and show, you know, all like first of all, like the amount of opposition to the coup, because like the formal version was like, you know, the nation and the شعبهم, like this is everybody is with the coup, and of course showing the massacres afterwards. So they are not going to allow, but there's going to be other channels or on social media, Facebook, and maybe other networks and other channels. That's why sometimes they are very angry at the foreign media, which is, I think, some of our colleagues here are going to talk about that in this afternoon. So they are not going to allow by themselves, but I think people like us and people who believe in democracy and in real journalism should continue to just tell the truth as much as they can in whatever medium is allowed to them, refute lies, reveal crimes, try as much as possible to abide by the code of ethics, even if the others are not doing the same. I think this is a very important weapon, and one has to be patient and sort of steadfast in this. It's a long process because it's over the hearts and minds of people who has been brainwashed since 1952.
So anyway, in conclusion, of course, I would like to thank all the panelists for providing us with this detailed information, and I think excellent context that can provide a good background for questions and answers and continuation of our discussion throughout the day. So thank you so much. And we are going to convene at